Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got mystery. We've got intrigue. We've got ourselves a spy. And we've also got informants.
I specialize in a very specific type of security.
You don't say, huh? All right, well, we'll get to some of that. I want to start you off with this great article from the Daily Caller, and I think this is essential reading, so we're going to cover the whole thing. This was written at 10 a.m. on the 14th by a senior Trump official, okay? Keeping in mind that that is an unnamed senior Trump official. The title is, I'm a senior Trump official, and I hope a long shutdown smokes out the resistance. As one of the senior officials working without a paycheck, a few words of advice for the president's next move at shuttered government agencies. Lock the doors, sell the furniture, and cut them down. Federal employees are starting to feel the strain of the shutdown, and I am one of them. But for the sake of our nation, I hope it lasts a very long time, till the government is changed and can never return to its previous form. The lapse in appropriations is more than a battle over a wall. It is an opportunity to strip wasteful government agencies for good. On an average day, roughly 15% of the employees around me are exceptional patriots serving their country. I wish I could give competitive salaries to them and no one else. But 80% feels no pressure to produce results. If they don't feel like doing what they're told, they don't. Why would they? We can't fire them. They avoid attention, plan their weekend, schedule vacation, their second job, their next position. Some do this in the same position for more than a decade. They do nothing that warrants punishment and nothing of external value. That is their workday. Errands for the sake of errands. Administering, refining, following, and collaborating on process. Process is your friend, is what delusional civil servants tell themselves. Even senior officials must gain approval from every rank across their department, other agencies, and work units for basic administrative chores. Process is what we serve. Process keeps us safe. Process is our core value. It takes a lot of people to maintain the process. Process provides jobs. In fact, there are process experts and certified process managers who protect the process. Then there are the 5% with moxie, career managers. At any given time, they can change, clarify, or add to the process, even to distort or block policy counsel for the president. Saboteurs peddling opinion as research, tasking their staff on pet projects, or pitching wasteful grants to their friends. Most of my career colleagues actively work against the president's agenda. This means I typically spend about 15% of my time on the president's agenda and 85% of my time trying to stop sabotage, and we have no power to get rid of them until the shutdown. Due to a lack of funding, many federal agencies are now operating more effectively from the top down on a fraction of their workforce, with only select essential personnel serving national security tasks. One might think this is how government should function, but bureaucracies operate from the bottom up, a collective of self-generated ideas. Ideas become initiatives, formalize into offices. They seek funds from Congress and become bureaus or sub-agencies, and maybe one day grow to be their own independent agency like ours. The nature of a big administrative bureaucracy is to grow to serve itself. I watch it and I fight it daily. When the agency is full, employees held liable for poor performance respond with threats, lawsuits, complaints, and process in at least a dozen offices, taking years of mounting paperwork with no fear of accountability, extending their careers while no real work is done. Do we succumb to such extortion? Yes. We pay them settlements, we waive bad reviews, and we promote them. Many government agencies have adopted the position that more complaints are good because it shows inclusion in, you guessed it, the process. When complaints come, it is cheaper to pay them off than to hold public servants accountable. The result? People accused of serious offenses are not charged, and self-proclaimed victims are paid by you, the American taxpayer. The message to federal supervisors is clear. Maintain the status quo, or face allegations. Many federal employees truly believe that doing tasks more efficiently and cutting out waste by closing troubled programs instead of expanding them is morally wrong, as one cried to me. I get it. These are their pets. It is tough to put them down and let go, and many resist. This phenomenon was best summed up by a colleague who said the goal in government is to do nothing. If you try to get things done, that's when you will run into trouble. But President Trump can end this abuse. Senior officials can reprioritize during an extended shutdown, focus on valuable results, and weed out the saboteurs. We do not want most employees to return because we are working better without them. Sure, we empathize with families making tough financial decisions like mine, and just like private citizens who have to find other work and bring competitive value every day while paying more than a third of their salary in federal taxes. President Trump has created more jobs in the private sector than the furloughed federal workforce. Now that we are shut down, not only are we identifying and eliminating much of the sabotage and waste, but we are finally working on the president's agenda. President Trump does not need Congress to address the border emergency. And yes, it is an emergency. Billions upon billions of hard-earned tax dollars are still being dumped into foreign aid programs every year that do nothing for America's interest or national security. The president does not need congressional funding to deconstruct abusive agencies who work against his agenda. This is a chance to effect real change, and his leverage grows stronger every day the shutdown lasts. The president should add to his demands, including a vote on all of his political nominees in the Senate. Send the career appointees back. Many are in the 5% of saboteurs and resistance leaders. A word of caution: to be a victory, this shutdown must be different than those of the past and should achieve lasting disruption with two major changes, or it will hurt the president. The first thing we need out of this is better security, particularly at the southern border. Our founders envisioned a free market night watchman state, not the bungled, bloated bureaucracy our government has become. But we have to keep the uniformed officers paid, which is an emergency. Ideally, continue a resolution to pay the essential employees only if they are truly working on national security. Furloughed employees should find other work, never return, and not be paid. Listen to what he said again. Furloughed employees should find other work, never return, and not be paid. Secondly, we need savings for taxpayers. If this fight is merely rhetorical bickering with Nancy Pelosi, we all lose, especially the president. But if it proves that government is better when smaller, focusing only on essential functions that serve Americans, then President Trump will achieve something great that Reagan was only bold enough to dream. And if you'll remember, Reagan shut down the government too, and it was about air traffic controllers. They decided to strike, and he went ahead and just let them strike. And I don't think a lot of them ever came back. I think mostly just the upper management ended up keeping their jobs, and it was about it. Reagan basically called their bluff. The president's instincts are right. Most Americans will not miss non-essential government functions. A referendum to end government plunder must happen. Wasteful government agencies are fighting for relevance, but they will lose. Now is the time to deliver historic change by cutting them down forever. Okay, so it's a bit of a lengthy article, and I want to actually get you through another article today too that adds on to this, because I think this is so important to truly understand. So what this senior Trump official is basically saying is to shut this down. Let a lot of these furloughed employees who are basically just pork fat, right, aren't really doing anything. Just let them go. Cut them free. After all, Trump can make a lot more headway without a lot of these people getting in the way. So in a lot of ways, this shutdown is brilliant. But this idea is still a little bit nebulous. So let me take you over to the American Thinker. This is by Thomas Lifson, written on the 15th, entitled Trump's Shutdown Trap. Has President Trump suckered Democrats and the deep state into a trap that will enable a radical downsizing of the federal bureaucracy? In only 5 more days of the already longest government shutdown in history, 25 days and counting as of today, a heretofore obscure threshold will be reached, enabling permanent layoffs of bureaucrats furloughed 30 days or more. Don't believe me that federal bureaucrats can be laid off? Well, in bureaucraties, a layoff is called an RIF, a reduction in force. And of course, it comes with a slew of civil service protections. But if the guidelines are followed, bureaucrats can be laid off, as in no more job. It is all explained by Michael Roberts here. And there is I'll leave this link here for you. You can see the definition here. It's off a legal website. A reduction in force is a thoughtful and systematic elimination of positions. For all practical purposes, a government RIF is the same thing as a layoff. Organizations must stick to predetermined criteria when sorting out what happens to each employee. They must communicate with employees how and why decisions are made. In deciding who stays and who goes, federal agencies must take 4 factors into account. Number 1, tenure. Number 2, veteran status. Number 3, total federal, civilian, and military service. And number 4, performance. You would think number 4 would be number 1. Just saying. Agencies cannot use RIF procedures to fire bad employees. A lot of procedures must be followed, and merit performance is the last consideration. But based on the criteria above, employees already furloughed can be laid off or RIF'd once they have been furloughed for 30 days or 22 work days. When agencies furlough employees for more than 30 calendar days or 22 discontinuous work days, they must use RIF procedures. An employee can be terminated or moved into an available position. This seems to be what was referenced in this remarkable essay written by an unidentified senior Trump official, and that's the one that we just read here, published in the Daily Caller, which vouches for the authenticity of the author and explains that it is protecting him from adverse career consequences should the name become known. Yeah, precisely. If you're wondering why would this official not name themselves, well, clearly that could have some backfire, right? Because that's going to expose a lot of fat. I strongly recommend reading the whole thing, and we did. The purported senior official makes the case that devotion to process eats up most of the time of federal bureaucrats and is also used by enemies of the president Trump's initiative to stymie the legitimate orders issued by his senior official. And I'm not going to read you these because this is the excerpt from the Daily Caller here. Then the senior official notes what I have just called the trap, and that's what this is right here. Most of my career colleagues actively work against the president's agenda. This means I typically spend about 15% of my time on the president's agenda and 85% of my time trying to stop sabotage, and we have no power to get rid of them until the shutdown. So that's really telling, isn't it? Those officials who waste time and stymie the president's initiative now are not present because they are not categorized as essential. And let me take you down here. If this was the plan all along, it would explain why President Trump goaded Chuck and Nancy in his televised meeting with them last year, boasting that he would claim credit for the shutdown. How could they resist a prolonged shutdown when he made it so easy to blame him? President Trump has proven that he is a disruptor who changes the framework of thinking on major issues by refusing to accept the givens, the assumptions of how things always have been done and therefore always must be done. Yeah, he tossed them a softball. They were really looking forward to blaming him for this shutdown because they thought it was going to have dire consequences. Meanwhile, Trump is more effective now, basically addition by subtraction, because you're taking away this 85% that's been working against him. So, who is the senior official? Well, I don't know, but I think Stephen Meuller is the sort of bold thinker who might volunteer to telegraph the strategy just 5 days before the deadline. Give Chuck and Nancy something to think about and probably reject as unthinkable. Then they can't complain that they weren't warned once the trap is sprung. Such a mass RIF would be the Trump version of Ronald Reagan firing the air traffic controllers when they went on an illegal strike in 1981. That was completely unexpected by his enemies, vehemently criticized, and successful. Among other benefits, it taught the leaders of the USSR that Ronald Reagan was a man whose threats cannot be dismissed as mere rhetoric. If you think that Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, Angela Merkel, and any other foreign leaders would not draw the same conclusion from a massive RIF, then you are kidding yourself. Yeah, so this has some big consequences, and that's why I wanted to take you through both of these articles so thoroughly, because I think it's really important to understand what's possible. Now, is this probable? I don't know. Remains to be seen. But we're coming up on this threshold in just a few days, right? So it remains to be seen what will happen. Probably by the weekend, we're going to figure out how close we are to this. But I just wanted to lay that out there to let you know what's possible. As to whether or not President Trump actually exercises this, we shall see. So will the POTUS pull out the bug spray while all the deep state knuckleheads are gone and partying in Puerto Rico? It remains to be seen. We're over here on the Twitter of Byron York. Former FBI General Counsel James Baker is subject of a criminal leak investigation. News contained in letter from Jim Jordan to U.S. Attorney in Connecticut. And here it is, all up in your face. This is addressed to the Honorable John H. Durham out of Connecticut. And I want you to remember that name, John H. Durham. This is from Representative Mark Meadows and Jacketless Jim Jordan. And basically this first paragraph says that they've had begun an investigation in October 2017, talking about the FBI, DOJ, and their political biases. The committees learned that in some instances, high-ranking DOJ and FBI officials, including the FBI General Counsel James Baker and DOJ Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, took the self-described unusual step of inserting themselves into the evidentiary chain of custody. During the course of our investigation, we interviewed former FBI General Counsel James Baker and discovered your office is investigating him for unauthorized disclosures to the media. So James Baker is one of our leaky McLeaky pants, right? Now, what we see here is a conversation between Mr. Jordan and Mr. Daniel Levin, who is counsel to James Baker. And he interjects here, says, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut, not to let him answer these questions right now. You may or may not know he's been the subject of a leak investigation, which is still a criminal leak investigation. Not part of Trump-Russia collusion. It's part of a criminal leak investigation that's still active at the Justice Department. So I am cutting off. Mr. Jordan says, can you speak more in the mic there? I'm sorry, I'm cutting off any discussions about conversations with reporters based on... You're saying he's under criminal investigation? This is Mark Meadows here. That's why you're not letting him answer? Mr. Levin says yes. Jacketless says, just to clarify for us, your counsel advising Mr. Baker not to answer that question not because it's classified, not because of any classification concerns, but because there is an ongoing investigation. By whom? Mr. Levin says the Justice Department. Jacketless Jim Jordan, I mean, is the Inspector General looking at this, or is this? No, it's Mr. John Durham, a prosecutor. Mr. Huber. Mr. Levin corrects. Jordan says Durham. Jordan says, okay, go back again. Tell me exactly what the investigation, the reason you can't answer more specific questions about the dossier is because there's an investigation, an ongoing investigation as we speak, looking into exactly what, Mr. Levin says. And I'm sorry, I didn't say he couldn't answer any questions about the dossier, and he has just answered some. I didn't want him talking about interactions with reporters because there's an ongoing leak investigation that the department is having. Mr. Jordan says he just talked to me about his interactions with a reporter. Mr. Levin, well, he's talked a little bit about it, but I don't want him talking about conversations he's had with reporters because I don't know what the questions are, and I don't know what the answers are right now, given that there is an ongoing investigation of him for leaks, which the department has not closed. I'm not comfortable letting him answer questions. So in terms of getting stuff from Mr. Korn, he told you what he remembers about it. Jacketless Jordan says, though he talked to me only about what Mr. Korn may have given him via information or actual documents or recordings or anything else, but he's not allowed to talk to me about information he may have given to Mr. Korn himself. Mr. Levin says, that's right. As a general matter, that's right. I mean, if you want to ask specific questions, we can figure it out. But as a general matter, I'm not comfortable having him talk about things he has said to reporters while the department still has an ongoing investigation. Mr. Jordan, did Franklin Foyer, the guy who wrote this article, did he ever reach out to you? Mr. Levin responds, I'm not going to have him answer any questions as asking about any interactions with the press. Jordan says, I'm not talking about whether he reached out to reporters. I'm asking, did reporters reach out to you? So it's coming this direction. Levin says, I understand. I'm not going to have him talk about any conversations with reporters. Mr. Jordan, well, I think last time we talked about Mr. Korn pretty in depth. Mr. Levin, I don't believe Jordan cuts him off, says, yes, we did. Mr. Levin, we talked about him bringing some information in, but I don't believe Anyway, I'm not going to let him answer the questions about whether he had conversations with reporters. So Mr. Levin putting the shutdown on Mr. Jordan. Are you ever going to give the same answer when I asked, did Mr. Isikoff ever reach out to you? And Mr. Isikoff is Michael Isikoff from Yahoo News. Mr. Levin says, yes, same instruction to him. So this is the rest of the letter here, essentially saying what they're doing, and this was back in October 2017. We are writing to request additional information about your ongoing criminal investigation of James Baker, as disclosed to the committees by Mr. Baker's attorney. On January 11, 2019, the New York Times published a story describing how senior FBI officials speculated about the president's motives in terminating Director James Comey. The story described testimony given to the committee in October by former FBI General Counsel James Baker. As the DOJ Office of Inspector General has documented, other senior FBI officials also disclosed sensitive information to the media, most notably former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. McCabe was fired for lying to the FBI's inspections divisions, lying to OIG investigators, and for lying to former Director James Comey about unauthorized communications with a news organization. Okay, well, I will leave this for you also to check out. Lots of interesting stuff, but it looks like we've got more leaky pants. Now, we already knew that James Baker was testifying. Back in September 12th, post 2157, where Q had posted, "Panic, panic, panic" in D.C. James Baker testifying against Comey, and James Baker was special counsel to Comey, so he knew a lot about what was going on with Comey. So if James Baker knew it, likely Comey knew the same.
Got a flashback aside, take you back,
Taking you back to December 12th, post 2603, where Q said, "Goodbye, Mr. Rosenstein. Rod Rowe still overseeing special counsel?" Well, we know the answer to that now, right? Schedule for tomorrow. Where is Huber? Nobody is above the law. The world is watching. Yeah. Where is Attorney Huber? He was supposed to testify in front of the House back then, and he was a no-show. And if you'll remember back then, someone was real upset. That's right. That was Representative Mark, hello, my ace man, my mellow mood Meadows. He was upset about this no-show. Now, I'm not going to play this in for a case of copyright, but I wanted you to be able to see it in case you want to search it on your own. You can just type that in right there. But he was a no-show. He ended up talking about military tribunals somewhere else, and it was sort of figured that he wasn't needed anyway because there were ongoing investigations. That's what Doyle and Monahan were saying at the time. So that was kind of glossed over by a lot of other people, but Q, of course, dialed us in and said, what if there's another prosecutor outside of D.C., assigned by Sessions with the same mandate authority? One for the history books, not long now. Well, we just got that clarification, didn't we? We got that over here in this interview. As a matter of fact, Jacqueline Jordan was even expecting the answer to be Mr. Huber, and Mr. Levin kept saying, no, it's Mr. John Durham, a prosecutor.
Madam Steam Action. Madam Steam Action.
Steamy, cheesy goodness. Well, let's check out this John Durham. Born 1950, is the U.S. Attorney for the District of Connecticut. Yeah, that's right, outside of D.C., right? He is best known for leading an inquiry into allegations that FBI agents and Boston police had ties with the mob, and his appointment as special prosecutor regarding the 2005 CIA interrogation tapes destruction. On November 1st, 2017, he was nominated by President Donald Trump to be Connecticut's next U.S. Attorney. On February 15th, 2018, his nomination to be the United States Attorney was confirmed by voice vote. He was sworn in on February 22nd, 2018. Now, I just want to point out this part here under the career. Amid allegations that FBI informants James Whitey Bulger and Stephen the Rifleman Fleming had corrupted their handlers, U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno named Durham special prosecutor in 1999. He oversaw a task force of FBI agents brought in from other offices to investigate the Boston's office handling of informants. And if you'll remember, earlier this year, James Whitey Bulger was murdered. That's right, he was murdered as he was being transferred. And there was something very, very strange about his death, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. But let me take you back to the Hartford Courant here, back in March 19th, 2018. John H. Durham, the U.S. Attorney for Connecticut, discussed the use of informants, a cautionary tale. He chronicled the downfall of former FBI Special Agent John Connolly Jr. and the global pursuit and eventual capture of James Whitey Bulger, the leader of Boston's brutal Irish mob. The talk was held March 5th at the University of St. Joseph. Durham was appointed by President Donald Trump and easily confirmed by the U.S. Senate in February. He is a graduate of Colgate University, earned a Juris Doctorate at the University of Connecticut Law School. He led a U.S. Department of Justice team that investigated the FBI's Boston field office into whether agents were compromised in their handling of informants, most notably the relationship between Bulger and Connolly. Bulger fled Boston in December 1994, right before a federal indictment came down. Connolly tipped off Bulger. In 2011, Bulger was captured in the storage area of his Santa Monica, California apartment complex where he was living with his girlfriend, Catherine Gregg. Federal agents found $800,000 in cash and 30 firearms hidden in Bulger's apartment walls. He was convicted on 31 of 32 counts of racketeering, money laundering, and related crimes, including 11 murders. And if you'll remember, he met himself a violent death as he was being transferred some months ago, right? As a matter of fact, what they said is that he was unrecognizable. And I want you to really remember that part. They said he was unrecognizable. So Whitey Bulger had a long reputation of being a bit of a fake, right? He was tipping people off out there in Boston. Of course, most notably this John Connolly. But who else was he tipping off? Well, if you don't remember, I'm going to rememberize you once more. We talked about this back in November. This was a piece from Louis Gohmert entitled Mueller Unmasked. And if you want to see more of this particular piece, please go to my video from November 1st entitled Bulger, Meuller, Bueller. And again, that's the November 1st, 2018, if you want to check that out. Now, we're not going to go through that whole piece, but that's what this is from. And this is really essential stuff. Mueller was the head of the criminal division as assistant U.S. attorney, then as acting U.S. attorney. I could not find any explanation online by Mueller as to why he insisted on keeping the defendants in prison that FBI agents in the pocket of Whitey Bulger had framed for a murder they did not commit. Make no mistake, these were not honorable people he had incarcerated, but it was a part of a pattern that eventually became quite clear that Mueller was more concerned with convicting and putting people in jail he disliked, even if they were innocent of the charges that he was, with ferreting out the truth. Okay, so I don't want to go way into this because I do already in this video, but I just want to point out that likely this John Durham would have known all about it, right? That's exactly what he was doing out there in Boston. He was tasked with figuring out exactly who was working with the mob back then, and it seemed very apparent that Mueller was one of them. I also want to point out in this Mueller Unmasked PDF that I really highly suggest that you read, Louis Gohmert is interviewing Robert Mueller regarding CAIR, which is the Council on American Islamic Relations, a group that I have long suspected that was involved with Jamal Khashoggi. So really, essentially, what I really want to point out is, what does Jamal Khashoggi and Whitey Bulger have in common? Both seem to be linked to Mueller. Both were murdered earlier this year. I guess you could say late last year, right? But more importantly, both were found unrecognizable. Okay, Patriots, that's all I got for you today. I am working on some other stories for you, so they may or may not get out by later today. We shall see how it comes along. I'm still doing some research, but either way, I will get at you really soon. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who already do that. I greatly appreciate all of you. If you're new to my channel, welcome to you. Please understand that from time to time, you will be unclicked and unnotified and unsubscribed. That's how social media works these days when you're searching for some truth. So just keep checking back, and do me a favor, join me on one of my other platforms in case this one gets discontinued. I'm over on Gab, BitChute, Brighteon.com. I'm also here on Twitter at IPOT1776. That's at IPOT1776. All those links are down below. My email's down below. My P.O. box is down below if you'd like to send me something. And if you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon link is down below. All those links are always down below, as well as to the links to some of the things that we talked about today. All right, kids, that's all I got for you. This is Sir Patrick Mack, and until next time, stay safe.